All right. Thanks, Ravens readers, for joining us today for our first summer baking club. Today we're going to be making some form of banana bread. We are recording this meeting just so that those of you who couldn't join us today can possibly watch at another time. We are going to be making banana bread with a streusel topping. I love the crunchy kind of gooey bits on top of a streusel muffin or pie. And so we're going to be using some old bananas and hopefully making a delicious treat. We are going to be making the muffin version. If you don't have muffin tins, but you do have a bread loaf, like a quick bread loaf, a smaller loaf pan. Let me grab one. You can use either. You can use muffin tins like this. You can also use like a loaf pan, which is usually it's like 5 by 8 inches. Is kind of what this one ends up being. You can use either. I'll make sure to cover both. The first thing you want to do though is definitely turn your oven on. We're going to turn the oven on to 350 degrees while we get started. So turn your oven on to 350 degrees. We'll let that preheat while we start to get ready with everything else we're doing. I did put the recipe in the chat, but for those of you that might be following along after we meet and won't have access to the chat, we are following a recipe from Tasty Kitchen, and it's called banana bread with streusel topping, a new twist. So if you are unable to find this recipe, you can email me and I'll send it to you. And we'll start from there. Now, bananas, right? The age-old, what do you do when a banana looks like this? Like really, truly, this is how I prefer to eat my bananas, when they're nice and yellow, but inevitably, sometimes they go bad, especially in the heat we've had in Seattle the last few weeks, for sure. We definitely ended up with some brown bananas. The good news is this is when they really taste the best in baked goods, because all those natural sugars have kind of come together and make for a nice squishy, delicious treat. So if you have bananas that are already brown, that's great. If you don't have bananas that are already brown, then there are instructions here for how to make this banana look like this banana. And the instructions are, first you're going to place them on a baking sheet. I happen to have a baking sheet here. And if I was going to brown my beautiful yellow banana, it says you need 3 whole bananas. You can put it on this plate, on this baking sheet, and you're going to stick it in the oven for about 15 minutes. And in fact, you could go ahead and do that now, because set my timer. If you are browning your bananas at home, go ahead and stick them in your oven. Even if the oven is not preheated, stick them in your 350 degree oven and we'll start getting the rest of our banana bread ready. All right, so while we wait for our bananas to brown, we're gonna go ahead and start getting ready for everything else. Okay. First, you're gonna start by taking whatever pan you're going to use. I'm gonna use muffin tins. And you want to prepare your muffin tins. You can do that in a couple of ways. One, if you happen to have the actual muffin papers, you can use those papers and drop them in. I'm going to use an assortment of green, and I'm going to use some pink. I like that combination. And you want to just get your line your muffin tins with these muffin wrappers. If you don't have muffin wrappers, You can use a little bit of butter on, I usually use a paper towel, and I wipe the butter on the inside of that muffin tin. That way they're a little less likely to stick. You can also spray the inside of your muffin tins with like a non-stick cooking spray. One of my favorites is Watson's makes this Bake Easy, which is kind of cool. It's just a non-stick baking spray that you can use, and you could spray that in there. If you're using a pan, you could do the butter trick on this again. You could literally just take some butter and then you would wipe it around so you cover all of the edges on the inside so that your pans are ready. You could also spray this with that non-stick cooking spray. So we've got our muffin tins ready. I'm going to set these aside. And we're going to go ahead and move on to the next step. If at any point you need me to slow down, you need me to go back over something, you can either turn on your microphone or just go ahead and drop any questions or comments you have in the chat, and I'll be sure to monitor that as well. So the next step is you may be getting your ingredients ready, but I'll just go ahead and kind of take a leisurely pace until you tell me to either speed up or slow down. We're going to use, I'm using a mixer. I'm using a stand mixer. You can use a hand mixer. If you have a hand mixer with the beaters that go around, you can do this by hand. It just takes a little longer and a little bit more muscle. So I'm going to go ahead and use my stand mixer, and we're going to cream the butter and sugar in a large mixing bowl until it's light and fluffy. So it asks for 8 tablespoons of butter. 8 tablespoons is generally 1 stick of butter. So this butter happens to be soft. It's helpful if it's soft. I left it out this morning. You can stick this in the microwave for like 8 seconds and it would soften up enough for you to stick it in there. I'm going to put my butter in first. 8 tablespoons of butter and 1 cup of granulated sugar. Granulated sugar is the white crystallized kind as opposed to powdery sugar that you put on your pastries. So 1 cup of granulated sugar. Measuring cups. 1 cup of sugar in my bowl. And just to give you a little bit of an idea, I'm using the wire whisk on my mixer. And now in my bowl, I have my stick of butter, 8 tablespoons, and my 1 cup of granulated sugar. I'm going to go ahead and get this started. Now, it's going to take a few minutes, just a couple of minutes to actually, I'm going to turn this on. It's kind of noisy. So you're welcome to turn your volume down if you'd like. And I'll go ahead and get that started. We'll whip this for just a couple of minutes. Occasionally stop it, grab a spatula or a wooden spoon, and just double check that you're scraping the sides of your bowl. go. And I'm going to turn it back on for just about 1 more minute. And we're looking to make it light and fluffy. One more time, scrape the sides of the bowl. Little secret, when I was a kid, didn't matter what we were baking, if it was butter and sugar, I'd eat it. It's kind of gross now that I think about it, but it tasted pretty good. All right, 30 more seconds. While you're waiting, you might grab 2 whole eggs. 2 whole eggs. All right. So now we've got that. I'll give you a quick peek at what this looks like. So light and fluffy color, kind of sticks together a little bit like, I don't know, like mud. You can see it light and fluffy, our butter and sugar. And now we're going to add the eggs one at a time. There are 2 eggs in this recipe, but we're going to just add it. I want you to add one at a time and then mix. So I have my 2 eggs. I'm going to go ahead. Because I'm not a great person, no, I'm not great with cracking eggs. I crack my egg into a measuring cup so that just in case I get any eggshell in there, I can pull it out. So I'm going to go ahead and drop this in, and you're going to mix 1 egg in at a time. So I'll stick this back in and start mixing. Going to get a little bit kind of gooier, and you can get your second egg ready by cracking it into that measuring cup or a coffee mug or a small bowl. And I'm going to go ahead and just drop this egg in while I'm mixing. I'm mixing in my second egg. Want to make sure maybe scrape that one time so you get any little bits that are sticking to the outside of the bowl. We'll maybe mix that for just a minute. And while you're mixing, why don't you grab a small bowl that you could mash your bananas in. I guess it's not super small. It's kind of a medium bowl, but I'll go mix this for 30 more seconds and we're going to smash some bananas. This is starting to look really good. It's got a little bit of like a fluffy texture to it. I'll show you. It's got a little bit of a fluffy texture to it, which is great. And now we're gonna let that stay in that big bowl while we get our bananas ready. If you are someone who is cooking your bananas in the oven, We are just about 3 minutes away. 3 minutes away from those being ready. And I'll just maybe pause for just a second and see if you have any questions. You can type them in the chat. You can turn your microphone on. Of course, let me know if you need me to go slower or faster or just the same. All right. Here we go. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and start with my, I know they look really pretty disgusting, brown bananas. The good news is they taste amazing. So I'm just going to start peeling these. They peel pretty easy. I'm dropping them right in this bowl. Of course, composting my banana peels. They are pretty brown, ready to be used. Kind of crazy that something like a banana can be good at both ends of that yellow and bright spectrum, and then they're really brown and kind of slug-like pattern. Like literally, it looks a little bit like a Pacific Northwest slug. Those big banana slugs. That's why they call them this. Okay, so I have my 4 bananas here in my bowl. I'm actually just going to use a fork and mash it so that they get, it's already pretty mushed, let's be honest. These are pretty ripe bananas, but they do need a little bit more mashing. So I'm going to go ahead and mash those up. And it's starting to look a little bit like baby food. If you've seen mashed baby food, it's something special for sure. All right, mashing up these bananas. Awesome. Okay, so now mashed bananas, and we're going to add the cinnamon and the nutmeg to this. So we need a couple of things. One, the recipe calls for fresh nutmeg. If you have whole nutmeg and you can do it, it's great. I love fresh nutmeg. I put it on my eggnog latte in the wintertime. Nutmeg is just a little nut, just like this. And the inside actually is really cool. I'll show you the inside. The inside smells amazing, but the inside has this really cool design inside, and that's the spice. So I'm going to use my little tool here. This is just a really great microplane. It has, it's like a super fine grater, and I'm just going to grate my nutmeg. It calls for 1/8 to 1/4 teaspoon of fresh nutmeg. I love nutmeg, so I'd err on the side of a little bit more than that. But an eighth to 1/4 teaspoon is really not that much to begin with. Oh, it smells so good. So I've gone ahead and I've added my grated nutmeg, and just, you know, for reference, this one is a 1/4 teaspoon. It's like one of the smallest. The 1/8 is the teeny tiniest. Okay, that's the banana. So if you happen to have a banana in the oven, go ahead and turn that off. And take your banana out. And you're going to turn your oven down to 325. It was at 350 degrees. Now you're going to turn your oven down to 325 degrees. And you're going to leave it on because that's where we're going to bake our muffins in just a minute. So in addition to the nutmeg, it also calls for 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon. About a teaspoon of ground cinnamon. We have the giant Costco sized container of cinnamon in our house because we used a lot of cinnamon. Set that aside, and I'm going to mix that in. So now we have bananas, we have cinnamon, and we have nutmeg. Oh, it smells so good. And then you're going to add a little bit of milk. You're going to add just a tablespoon of milk. Calls for whole milk. You really can use whatever milk you have in your house. It's not going to make a big difference at this point. It's just a tablespoon. It's just to help bind things together, get those ingredients start to work together. There's I've added 1 tablespoon of milk to my bananas, my cinnamon, and my nutmeg, and I'm going to mix that all in. Kind of looks a little bit like oatmeal. Yeah, if you ever had oatmeal with like cream in it or something. Okay, so I have a banana mixture. I have a butter, sugar, and eggs mixture in my big bowl. I'm gonna quickly compost my bananas. Awesome. Now, next, we're going to whisk together the dry ingredients. So I'm going to grab another bowl, handy dandy bowl here, and I'm going to measure out the dry ingredients. 2 cups of flour. I'm going to rinse out my measuring cup. 2 cups of flour is our first dry ingredient. Ding. So I'm measuring in half cups, which means I need 4 half cups to make 2 whole cups. All right. Here's. So I've got my flour, 2 cups of flour in my bowl, and I also want to grab the baking powder, baking soda, and salt. Baking powder, baking soda, and salt. So 1 teaspoon of baking powder. I use this kind. Clever Girl, there's a bunch of different kinds you can buy at the store. Measure out your teaspoon of baking soda into that dry ingredients bowl. I'm going to add 1 teaspoon also of baking soda. So baking powder, baking soda, and then 1 teaspoon of salt. I use, it looks gigantic, I use kosher salt in baking. I've been told that the larger kosher salt helps with the release of flavor in whatever you're baking, but regular over-the-counter table salt works just fine. So I've got in my bowl, I've got my flour, 2 cups of flour, 1 teaspoon of baking powder, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, and 1 teaspoon of salt. Grab a fork or something. It's just a good idea to go ahead and mix that up. Kind of breaks up. Sometimes the baking powder or baking soda can kind of get lumpy. Helps to break that up and mix it really evenly in this bowl of dry ingredients. Okay, next step is we have our 3 bowls worth of stuff, and now we're going to add the banana mixture to the creamed butter and sugar mixture and mix until it's combined. So we're going to take our delicious looking bananas, and they're kind of like oatmeal-y looking. I'm going to use my handy dandy spatula I have here, and I'm going to add this into my bowl. There we go. I want to mix that up. Again, take just a second. Add those two together. Mixing our bananas with our butter and sugar just until it's combined. Honest, you know, they doesn't look so hot right now. It's banana bread. It's not meant to be pretty, but I'll give you a quick peek. So because the nature of the ripeness of these bananas and the ingredients, if you look at it, kind of looks like, I don't know, like cream of wheat, or it looks kind of separated. But the good news is the flour mixture is going to totally get the job done here. So I'm going to add my flour mixture into the bowl. Whole thing. Stick it back. Mixer. Okay. Here we go. Turn this down a little. You can probably see it better that way too. Okay. Now it says to mix until the flour is dissolved. So until the flour is sucked up by that moisture. Oh, that looks so much better. It's more like banana bread. I'm going to give it a quick scrape because there's some flour that's stuck to the top there. Scrape the bowl. We'll turn it back on again. This looks delicious now. Okay. Excellent. So now, I'll show you what this looks like. This looks so delicious. I'm ready to make this. This looks more like a cake batter. Delicious. Doesn't look separated any longer. The flour is totally mixed in. And then the next job is to make sure we review all of our ingredients, that we put everything in, and then we're going to get the batter ready to bake. So we're going to go ahead, and one of the advantages too, if you're doing the loaf, just know it's going to take longer to bake. And you'll need to set a timer, and we'll talk about that when we get there. One of the advantages to doing a muffin is that it doesn't take as long. So if you will trust me, if you'll bear with me, we're going to veer slightly off from the way the recipe is laid out, only in that we're using the same ingredients. We're just putting them together in a little bit different order. So what I'm going to do now is you can either, I'll show you two ways to do this. One, if you have a cookie scoop, it looks like an ice cream scoop. It does this. If you have one of these, this works great. I'll also show you one of the tricks my grandmother taught me using just 2 regular teaspoons. I'll show you the first one, and I might just turn this down a little so you can see. Slide this over, and here's my batter. Now here's the way my grandma taught me. She taught me to get the scoop in like this, and you just see how I'm making a rounded scoop as I go. And again, I'm using the tablespoons. These are a little larger than like the spoon you'd eat your breakfast cereal with. But I'm going to go ahead, and it's scooping up like kind of a full scoop. And then you just rub those two together, and it helps you kind of put it in the muffin tin without getting the goo all over the outside. So I'll do one more of those. Just go ahead and take a nice big scoop, and then use the 2 spoons together to kind of make it rounded. When you're filling your muffin tin, you're filling it about 2/3 full. And then here is how I could use roughly the same size. The nice thing, I usually do it a little, see it's a little over the top there, a little fuller than level. And this is nice because you can scoop straight in again without getting too much of the goo all over the outside of your papers. So I'm going to go ahead and scoop these guys up, fill them up. Looks like I'm going to have space for more than a dozen, which is fine. Okay. Now, one thing that this recipe says to do is to wait to put the streusel topping on until the bread is mostly cooked. But because we're making muffins and we're not waiting 45 minutes or so for, I'm going to fill a couple of these that were kind of small. We're not waiting the full 45 minutes. If you're making the muffins, we're going to put the streusel topping on before we put it in the oven, which is totally fine. I'm just adding a couple of extra scoops on top. Again, we want them about 2/3 full. It's kind of a guessing game sometimes to know how much they'll rise while you're doing that. But because we're putting that streusel topping on, we won't see any of these weird little dollops on top. Okay, I'm just going to set this aside for right now so we can keep working. All right. So here is my 2 muffin tins. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make the streusel topping. Now for the streusel topping, you're going to need cold butter, flour, cinnamon, brown sugar, salt, and if you want, nuts. Nuts are always optional as far as I'm concerned. But man, in a streusel topping, if you have nuts, you can use walnuts. I'm going to use pecans today, one of my favorite nuts to put on top of things. And you're going to start by getting the streusel topping ready by combining all of those ingredients. And I'll also show you, I'm going to use a pastry cutter, but I'll show you again. One of my Grandma Alice's tips for how to make a streusel topping, even if you don't have a pastry cutter. So I'm going to get another bowl. Actually, I can use, because this was just my dry ingredients. I like the efficiency of just using the same bowl. I'm going to go ahead and put the ingredients in here that I need. So I need 4 tablespoons of butter, which is, remember, originally we used 8 tablespoons was 1 cube. So 4 is going to be half. And again, if I'm going too fast or you need me to repeat something, just drop it in the chat. I'm going to put my butter in my bowl. Put this down a little so you can see. All right. The next thing I need to put into my bowl for my streusel topping is 1/3 cup of all-purpose flour. 1/3 cup of flour. Okay. Put that in there. Excellent. The next thing that I need is 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon. We already had that out. Our banana bread. So I will go ahead and stick this in here. Teaspoon of cinnamon. Excellent. Okay. And then I need 1/3 cup of brown sugar. There's my 1/3 cup of brown sugar. This is a pinch, just a pinch of salt. Just to add a little pinch of salt there. And if I want to include pecans. So I'm going to really quickly set this aside, and I'm going to chop up my pecans. Got a recipe up here. Okay. Pecans, and the good news is you can chop pecans to whatever size, or walnuts if you're using walnuts, or maybe you're not using nuts. It says to have about 1/3 cup of chopped nuts. So I'm going to go ahead and just chop these bad boys. Some people have like a handheld chopper. You could also put these in a food processor if you have one of those. I don't have one. We do have at Eagle Staff, we do have a baking library, and you can borrow things like muffin tins and really cool tools that maybe not everybody has at home. One of those is a food processor. So if you ever wanted to use a food processor, you absolutely could. I'm just gonna chop them a little smaller. I have never myself taken any like culinary classes, so I probably am not the person to follow as far as knife skills are concerned. I know it's an art form for sure. Okay, so I want it to be a little bit smaller, so I'm going to go through one more time. Okay, there are my nuts. Okay, so now we're going to add these in. It's maybe a little more than 1/3 cup, and you can measure 1/3 cup. I'm gonna go like that and say that's 1/3 cup. Baking absolutely is science, and at the same time, it's also, there are opportunities for a pinch of salt or a handful of nuts. And here is my streusel topping. But now I need to get my pastry cutter out, and I'll also show you Grandma Cross's trick for how to break this up if you don't have a pastry cutter. Pastry cutter looks like this. It has these blades. They're not actually sharp, but at least this one's not. But this is a way, this is a pastry cutter. You can hold it like this, and you basically are pushing and chopping the ingredients like the butter together so that it makes like a crumble. And I usually like work my way around. Now here is the, if you don't have a pastry cutter way, you could put this also in a food processor. It would work. You could also put it in a mixer. So the good old-fashioned way is 2 spoons. And the idea is you're just cutting across your ingredients like this, and you just keep doing that until you get little tiny pieces. You can mix it up a little, and you just keep cutting across like this. It's going to start to break that up. Okay. For ease of use and speed, I'm going to go ahead and use my pastry cutter. Get through these pretty quickly. And then the streusel topping goes right on top of these muffins. So I'm working, you kind of want it to be like pea-sized. If you can think about peas, sometimes you need to scrape it. Get it over there. But you want pea-sized pieces. It's kind of the same when you're making like a pie crust. You want pea-sized pieces of butter, which is like the ideal size or shape for melted butter in delicious baked goods. All right, here we go. And while you are baking and or watching, if you have ideas, for what we should do in 2 weeks when we bake again together, If there's something in particular you want to learn how to bake, if there's something you love to eat that you want to bake, I would love for you to put that in the chat or send me an email and tell me what you might want to bake. Okay, see, we're getting some nice crumbles here. Perfect. Give it a little bit more time here. Feels starting to come together too a little bit, which is nice. That'll be good for when we sprinkle it on top. Now, if you're somebody who doesn't like to touch stuff, it's totally fine. This is kind of gooey and slimy, butter and sugar and all. You can use a spoon and sprinkle on top of your muffins. I'm going to go ahead and just sprinkle, use my hand. I washed my hands before we started, and I'm just going to grab a handful, and it's a little messy, that's fine. These things wash. And go ahead and fill the top of your muffin tin with some streusel, just like that. Butter and sugar, cinnamon, and pecans or walnuts. Awesome. I sometimes mix it up as I go so that I, don't just get a handful of one ingredient. Okay, there's one, and then if you want, you can kind of sweep it a little, just so it's a little neater when you bake it. Do the next one. Okay, so our oven was at 325, and we're going to need to take a peek at how long usually muffins take. Kind of depends, but I want to double check on this one since we've converted this recipe for today to muffins instead of banana bread. If you're baking the banana bread, if you're going to put this in your loaf pan, you're going to fill your loaf pan with the dough, with the batter, and then you're going to bake it for 30 minutes first. So if you're doing the loaf pan, you're going to bake it for 30 minutes first. Then you're going to add your streusel topping for the last 10 to 15 minutes of baking. That's how the loaf works. Again, because the muffins tend to bake a lot faster. Okay, wash my hands. If you are somebody who likes nice and tidy, you can also hold your muffin tin up over, and you can just kind of give it a little sweep into that bowl. Kind of also workstation clean. These are ready to go in the oven. So my oven's ready for me at 325. I'm going to go ahead and put these in, and together we'll figure out how long we want to bake these. Okay, muffins are ready to go. I'm going to stick these in the oven. Sit tight. So I just put my muffins in. I'm going to just double check our time for how long we want to bake these. All right. Okay, so we're going to bake these for somewhere between 10 and 15 minutes. Now, it's a little confusing, right? 10 to 15 minutes seems like a lot. So some of it depends on how hot your oven is. Some of it depends upon how what elevation you're at. Sometimes affects baking time. I'm going to go ahead and mark this for 10 minutes. Set my timer there, and then I'll show you a trick for how we do that. Let me check to make sure they're ready. Set my timer. So the truth of the matter is, from the moment I put them in, it's probably going to be about 11 minutes. I'm not worried about that. So this is a good opportunity while we wait those 10 minutes to go ahead and start cleaning up what you're doing. I've got my egg shells I'm going to put away. Put away my microplaner. Wipe my countertop down. I can get the last few extra muffins that I had extra batter for. Another muffin tin. It's actually a good time to just review what we're doing. So I think I might get maybe 4 more out of this. Another big one. Excellent. I mean, you don't want to waste. You don't want to waste anything. If you've got the batter, you might as well make it. Okay. All right, and I'm going to take the last little bit of my streusel topping. Top. You can also, if you don't like the streusel topping, you don't have to do it. These are just delicious without it as well. So that's, again, a little bit of preference. Or if you're not sure, sometimes it just takes a while. You do one way, or you do half of them, and then you do another half the other way. That works too. Okay, might as well finish off this streusel here. And take my pan. I can stick these guys in. All right, so while we're waiting for baking, let's cover a few things. One, our next baking club meeting. Well, I'd love to have a regular baking club where during the school year and throughout the summer, you know, maybe we meet every 2 weeks, maybe we meet once a month. We could do thematic things. I'd love for students to be able to choose what they want to bake. I'll be totally honest with you. My husband was like, are you going to do anything with those bananas? And I was like, yeah, baking clubs tomorrow. So we did something with the bananas, which was great. But will you add for me in the chat, what are some things you might want to bake this summer? Anything you think you might want to bake. You could even search for a minute, grab a cookbook. What kinds of things do you think you'd want to bake? Go ahead and put those in the chat. Anything you'd like to bake. What would you like to bake the next time? I have a cookie recipe that can be or anything else you want to add to it. That's kind of fun to sometimes take one batter and make a bunch of different kinds. Ooh, Megan says mint brownies. Yeah, that would be delicious. Alice, let me know if there's anything you think you might want to make. Cool thing about brownies, and sometimes, like I said, that cookie batter, you can oftentimes take something like a brownie and you can add whatever flavor you want, depending upon what you want to do. So sometimes in our family, we add peanut butter to it or caramel, and we swirl it in the batter before we make it. You can buy mint chocolate chips. Some people even put like peppermint chunks, like from a a candy cane. That'd be good. What else? What else might you want to bake? Last summer, we did hand pies, which are pretty cool. And hand pies don't actually take a lot to make. You can use butter, sugar, flour, and water to make a pie crust. And then you can fill it either with jam or with fresh fruit. Hand pies are pretty good. Delicious in the summer. Oh, cake pops. Yeah. You know what would be really cool, Alice, about that is I'm going to need to do some research. We do have, speaking of Eagle staff, we do have in our baking library, we have a cake pop mold. I know some people do it 2 different ways. You can either bake them in circles, which is what our cake pop mold does at school, or you can, you actually make the cake and then you mix it with frosting, which sounds delicious. You mix it with frosting, and then that is how you make and mold the cake pop, and then you dip it like in chocolate. So I'll do some research. If you have, Alice, if you have a recipe that you've used before, if you could send it to me, that'd be awesome. Then I could practice, because that'd be fun too. So we've got mint brownies, cake pops. Awesome. That sounds great. I can already smell the banana bread. It smells so good. I'm going to go give it a quick peek, see where we are. So it says we've got about 3 minutes left in the first 10 minutes. I'm looking at these, and I'm guessing it's going to be a little closer to 8 minutes. So the good news is, I think honestly, like our 1 hour of baking club, because there's 7 minutes left until 3 o'clock, I think it's going to be like almost perfect, which will be great. So we've got cake pops, we've got mint brownies. You can put more than one suggestion in the chat. Certainly there's, at this point, if we have 2 more done this summer, the 21st of July and the 11th of August, we can do both of those. Wonder, cookies, cake pops, mint brownies, hand pies. Macarons are something that I think are super fancy and delicious. My daughter makes them. I have never made them, but they're incredibly labor intensive. That might be something we do, like if we do end up making a baking club, which I think would be awesome. If either of you are interested in going through that process, it's kind of cool. We have an ASB at school. It's called the Associated Student Body. And oh good, Megan's interested. So Megan, what I will do, I will include you on this as well, Alice, just in case. And you can always decide whenever, but there's paperwork that we fill out, and I can be your teacher advisor. I think Miss White also was thinking of wanting to help, so we could be both of us, but we would meet once school started and make a plan and invite other people, and we submit that to ASB, and then ASB basically kind of gives us permission to be an official club, which is kind of fun. I don't know, we could do things like make ourselves our very own aprons with, you know, whatever logo we design. That'd be kind of fun. I'm super messy. So I wear aprons, especially when I have a white shirt on. But yeah, I'll email you both about how we could possibly start a club. And then like we might as well hit the ground running. If we have some fun baking this summer, I know we'll get more students once we're back at school, because we could even meet after school, quite frankly. I think that there are a couple of classrooms that we could do it 2 ways. We could have some meetings at school where we bake at school, because we have a couple of places where we can use ovens, or we could do it just like this, virtually, where we join each other. So I'm going to go peek at those muffins. My timer's going off. I'm gonna grab, if I can find it. I have this little tool. It's the cake tester. I got it for my birthday. Oh, thanks, Alice, for that recipe. It's just something you stick into the muffin, and I'll show you what it looks like when I pull it out. Hang on just a second. Okay, so I stuck this in at 10-minute mark, and you're probably gonna be able to see that. You can see there's goo on it. That, I stuck this right in the middle of the muffin. I could actually tell when I looked at the muffin that they were kind of wiggly and not quite done. So I've set my timer for 5 more minutes. We'll wait 5 more minutes and just double check it again. There's that. It's not, so I'm gonna clean this off so I'm ready to test it again. Take a peek at chocolate. You both are chocolate lovers. Brownies and chocolate cake pops. Yum. Interesting story. Alice mentioned chocolate cake pops. Megan, you mentioned brownies, mint brownies. And I've mentioned to you a couple of times today that things that my grandma Alice taught me. And her name was Alice Cross, interestingly enough. And one of the things she gave me, didn't necessarily teach me, was a chocolate allergy. I was allergic to chocolate for most of my life, or most of my younger life. So I adore chocolate now that it's not an allergy anymore, but I used to get really, really bad ear infections if I ate chocolate. So I have time to make up. So we'll definitely, I'm looking at this recipe that Alice just submitted, and it looks like you bake the cake and you mix it with frosting, and then you make the balls. So the other thing I will do, Megan did a great thing. She emailed me and said, I need the recipe. I want to make sure I have all the ingredients. I'll be honest, I just wasn't quite ready for today. And so I tried to pick something that you might just have easy access to ingredients. I will send out an email beforehand next time, like a few days before, so that if you do want to go and shop for ingredients, you can do that. I will also ask if there's a way, and there may be a way through school that we can make some of the supplies available for pickup on the day of the baking club. That'd be kind of cool too, if you could swing by school and pick those up. So I'll look into that as well. We are probably like 3 minutes away. I know it's almost 3 o'clock. Sit tight. I'm gonna leave it closed for the 2 minutes that are left. One of the things that's really hard to do when you're baking and you're like, is it done? Is it done? Is every time we open the oven, we let heat out, right? And so that affects the chemistry and the baking temperature of the oven. And so trying as best you can to leave it closed is really important, though not always easy. Okay, 2 minutes, here we go. And I'll be totally honest, here's what we'll do. Even if they are not done in 2 minutes, I'm going to give you a peek into the oven, give you a little bit of a look at what they are and what they look like, and we'll plan. It smells good. So Megan, were you able to bake along with us? Yeah, oh good, I'm so glad. And the pace was okay as far as how fast we went? It does smell really good. It's got almost like, it's got that sweet banana smell, but it also has kind of a delicious buttery smell because there's that whole cup, or half a cup, excuse me, of butter in there. I'm gonna peek in the window one more time. They do look good. I'm gonna go ahead and get this ready. I'm gonna move my camera down because I'll take out one pan and we'll test it, and I'll let you see I'm testing it. Generally, you would want to test it in the oven so that, again, you don't let too much temperature out. It doesn't change too much for the muffins. Okay, let me go grab this. I'll be right back. So here is one. I can see some wet spots, so I'm worried they're not quite done, but I'm going to stick my tester in. I'm going to pull it out, and you can see, let's see, yeah, there's a little bit of goo on there. So I'm going to just grab my other muffin tin here. I'm going to pull out the others. The other ones near the back of my oven look pretty done. Sometimes the front and the back of an oven do different things. So I'm gonna clean this off. I'm gonna stick it in here. They look so fluffy. Okay, that one's totally clean. We have got these muffins. I'm gonna leave my others in there for like 2 minutes. I'm gonna set my timer so I don't forget. Sometimes I push way too many buttons. These are ready. So I would let them cool for about 10 minutes before you take them out of your muffin tin. I have like crazy hands, and so I have already pulled one out. You can see I pulled it out, but I would let them cool in the muffin tin for about 10 minutes and then go ahead and pop them out and eat them. They're ready and they're delicious. So thank you so much for joining us today. If you have any questions about anything, please feel free to email me. And I look forward to baking with you all in 2 weeks. I will share with you, well, I might do brownies first, and then we'll do cake pops, because the cake pops might need us to get some supplies together. So let's plan on brownies next time, cake pops after that. Thanks so much for coming today. Super fun. Bye-bye.